In 2011, a private collector acquired an ancient Babylonian tablet. On it was a carved image of a massive ziggurat, with a cuneiform inscription identifying it as Etemenanki, the temple of the foundation of heaven and earth in Babylon. Beside the tower, a portrait of Nebuchadnezzar himself. It may be the closest thing to a photograph of the Tower of Babel ever found. Welcome to Chronicle Unknown. Here are 3 rapid facts to kick us off. 1. This stele dates back to the 6th century BC. 2. It outlines the exact building materials mentioned in Genesis. And 3. It proves a massive tower actually existed. Today, we're taking a story most people think is pure legend and treating it as a genuine historical investigation to reveal the forensic evidence behind a very real physical structure. So let's dive right in with our modern-day smoking gun, the 2011 Babel stele. This black stone tablet, which dates right between 604 and 562 BC, completely turns the idea that Babel is just a fairy tale totally on its head. It features a clear carved image of the Etemenanki ziggurat and a portrait of King Nebuchadnezzar II. This gives us undeniable physical proof from the actual era. We're literally taking the Tower of Babel off the theology shelf and pinning it right onto the corkboard of a concrete archaeological cold case.
Professor Andrew George, the scholar who analyzed this artifact, hit the nail on the head when he said, "It may be the closest thing to a photograph of the Tower of Babel ever found." I mean, just imagine the shockwaves this sent through the archaeological community. A structure that, for centuries, was pretty much just relegated to Sunday school lessons, suddenly materialized right there in solid stone. We are looking at an unprecedented contemporary visual record made by the exact people who built it.
Here is the roadmap for our explainer today. We're going to unpack this mystery step by step by looking at the biblical legend, the unearthing of Etemenanki, the tower Stele itself, the Sumerian connection, what remains of Babylon today, and finally some lingering open questions.
Part 1. The Biblical Legend. It's time to examine the case file.
Before we start digging in the dirt, we really have to look at what the primary text actually claims. Genesis 11:4 says, "Come, let us build us a city and a tower whose top may reach unto heaven, and let us make us a name, lest we be scattered abroad upon the face of the whole earth." The text describes a united humanity migrating to the plain of Shinar, trying to build a city and a skyscraping tower before God intervenes to scramble their language. You see, in the ancient world, building a tower to the heavens wasn't just about architectural ambition, it was about usurping divine authority. This is immense human hubris, which gives us the high-stakes motive for our historical crime scene.
But what's really fascinating here is the highly specific engineering checklist the text provides. It explicitly mentions baking bricks and using bitumen, which is basically a natural tar or slime, for mortar. This right here translates a vague myth into a tangible construction project. And this is an incredible forensic clue, guys. Why? Because in ancient Israel, builders almost exclusively used stone. But down in the alluvial plains of lower Mesopotamia, there was no stone. They had to use kiln-fired mud bricks and bitumen. So the author of Genesis actually possessed intimate, spot-on knowledge of lower Mesopotamian construction techniques thousands of years before modern archaeology even existed. How crazy is that?
Section 2. Unearthing Etemenanki. Let's head to the crime scene.
Armed with those forensic details, we move to ancient Babylonia to see if we can find a match. In 1913, a German engineer named Robert Koldewey was digging through the deep, shifting sands of Babylon, and what his team uncovered was absolutely massive. They found an architectural footprint featuring a core of sun-dried bricks wrapped in a thick, protective outer wall of kiln-fired bricks. And guess what was holding all those fired bricks together? You guessed it, thick layers of bitumen. The materials were a literal, undeniable match for our Genesis checklist.
This massive footprint belonged to the Etemenanki. It was a monumental stepped ziggurat sitting right at the center of the Babylonian world. The name itself is Sumerian for the house of the foundation of heaven on earth, and it was dedicated to their supreme god Marduk. In Babylonian theology, this wasn't just a tall building to show off. It was designed as a literal access connecting heaven and earth, a cosmic staircase basically, giving the gods a pathway down and humanity a bridge up. To really wrap our heads around the magnitude of the Etemenanki, we need to focus on the number 91. The ground floor alone measured an astounding 91 by 91 meters. From that colossal base, 7 massive terraces rose up to an estimated height of 91 meters. Let's put that into perspective. Imagine a 30-story skyscraper made entirely out of ancient mud brick, just completely dominating a flat, endless desert landscape. It would have been an awe-inspiring and honestly terrifying display of imperial power.
Moving on to Section 3, the Tower Stele. It's time to read the confession.
Let's bring it back to our smoking gun from earlier, the 2011 Babel Stele. The cuneiform inscription on it is basically King Nebuchadnezzar openly bragging about his creation. He acts like the ultimate arrogant dictator, leaving behind a manifesto that perfectly mirrors the biblical theme of hubris. He literally writes that he raised the superstructure of Etemenanki to have its summit rival the heavens, and he explicitly notes using Bitman and Baked Brick throughout. We are reading the architect's own project summary, and it matches the biblical description almost word for word.
The inscription also answers a massive question. Who actually built this thing? Well, Nebuchadnezzar mobilized tens of thousands of workers from conquered nations all across his empire. He conscripted what he called the teeming people of the inhabited world, pulling kings from remote mountains and people from far-flung islands. This right here is the ultimate aha moment of our investigation. Picture the absolute chaos of a multinational forced labor camp. You've got tens of thousands of enslaved workers from all corners of the world shouting instructions in dozens of different dialects. To an outside observer, this chaotic mix of foreign languages would literally sound like Babel. So the famous confusion of tongues might not have been a sudden magical event. It was the harsh, everyday reality of a brutal imperial worksite.
Section 4, the Sumerian connection. Let's look into some prior offenses.
The trail of this story goes back even further, revealing that this cultural memory wasn't an isolated incident. Long before Genesis was written, the idea of a massive tower project leading to a divine scrambling of languages was already echoing around the ancient Near East. Just look at the Sumerian epic, Enmerkar and the Lord of Arata. It tells a shockingly similar tale where the whole universe speaks one tongue, until the god Enki disrupts their linguistic unity during the construction of a great ziggurat. It just shows how deeply the trauma of a collapsed, linguistically diverse building project was baked into the DNA of Mesopotamian culture centuries before Israel was even a blip on the radar.
Section 5. Babylon's Remains Today. Welcome to the Cold Case.
So after all this incredible engineering, the immense hubris, and the sweat of tens of thousands of conscripted laborers, what is actually left of this magnificent structure today? Well, over the centuries, the mighty towers slowly fell apart. In a bit of tragic irony, when Alexander the Great conquered Babylon, he was so blown away by it that he ordered the ruins cleared so he could rebuild the tower to its former glory. But his sudden death in 323 BC put a hard stop to that. Later on, a Seleucid prince ordered the remaining debris completely destroyed. Today, if you go to the site in modern Iraq, there is no towering monument reaching the heavens. That grand ambition for immortality has been reduced to a marshy, water-filled square trench. That's it. That's all that's left of the foundation of heaven and earth.
Section 6. Lingering Open Questions. It's time for the verdict.
We've laid out the forensic and historical evidence, but the final verdict rests on how we interpret these surviving fragments. Let's build some context using a timeline. Notice the incredible synchronicity here. Early ziggurats pop up around 3000 BC, but look really closely at the 6th century BC. Jewish exiles arrived in Babylon right around 586 BC. That is the exact moment King Nebuchadnezzar was finishing up this massive, multilingual engineering marvel. Put yourself in the shoes of an exiled Israelite for a second. They were actually there. They saw the looming shadow of the tower, and they heard the cacophony of dozens of foreign languages spoken by the enslaved workforce.
And so we're left to ask, what exactly is Genesis 11? Were the captive authors recording a literal historical construction event they were witnessing firsthand? Is this story actually a biting theological critique of Nebuchadnezzar's arrogant imperialism, mocking his grand ambition by chalking the project's failure up to divine judgment? Or did the famous confusion of tongues simply reflect the chaotic, on-the-ground reality of a forced labor camp where workers genuinely couldn't communicate? Honestly, it seems like we might be looking at a brilliant forensic recording of two sides of the exact same historical event. One side saw a glorious temple reaching up to the gods, while the other side saw an arrogant, chaotic disaster.
As we close out this explainer, I want to leave you with one final, provocative thought. For centuries, the Tower of Babel was relegated entirely to the realm of fable and moral allegory. But now, we've got the blueprints, we've got the bricks, and we even have the builder's own confession. So I have to ask you, does archaeological evidence for a real tower change how you read the Babel story? Thank you for joining me on Chronicle Unknown. Keep questioning history, and I'll see you in the next investigation.